You think you understand electricity. You use it every second. Right now, electrons are coursing through the device in your hands. Electricity powers your lights, preserves your food, connects you to the world. You've lived with it your entire life. So explain it to me. What happens when you flip a switch? Where does that power actually come from? What is electricity? Most people mumble something vague. It's energy. It's electrons moving through wires. It's current. That's not an answer. That's just repeating words. You've renamed the mystery without explaining anything. Sure, electrons move. But what pushes them? Why does that pushing create light, heat, motion? Why can a power plant miles away make your lamp glow instantly? Here's what nobody told you. The thing we call electricity is one of the strangest phenomena in the universe. The way we teach it domesticates something wild, makes it seem ordinary and safe. But once you see what's actually happening, once you understand the forces at play, you realize we're manipulating something so powerful, so fundamentally weird, that it breaks everything you think you know about how reality operates. Most people go their entire lives without realizing this. They flip switches, charge phones, and never question the miracle they're commanding. If you're still reading, you're already different. You want to understand, not just use. That matters more than you know. Let me show you what I mean. Try this. Grab a piece of plastic wrap. Rub it between your hands for 30 seconds. Now hold it near your arm without touching. Watch the hairs stand up, reaching toward the plastic like tiny fingers grasping at something invisible. Stop and think about that for a second. You rub plastic, no batteries, no wires, no power source. Just friction. And now that plastic reaches across empty air and pulls on your body. How is that possible? In your everyday experience, forces require contact. You push a chair by touching it. You lift a book by grabbing it. Objects interact by physically meeting. Yet here's plastic affecting your arm through empty space, through nothing at all. Most people shrug. Static electricity, something from middle school. Not important, not important. You're looking at one of the four fundamental forces governing the entire universe. The force that holds every atom in your body together. The force that makes chemistry possible. The force that allows your neurons to fire, your heart to beat, your eyes to process these words. You're watching electromagnetic force act across distance, demonstrating its power to affect matter without touching it. And you think it's a party trick. This is the problem. We've become so familiar with electricity that we've forgotten how absolutely insane it is. Here's what actually happened with that plastic wrap. When you rubbed it, you scraped electrons off your hands and deposited them onto the plastic surface. Just a few trillion extra electrons, essentially nothing compared to the total number present. But those excess electrons hate each other. They push apart with a force so enormous you literally cannot comprehend its magnitude. Let me try anyway. Take two electrons. Place them 1 centimeter apart. The electromagnetic force between them is approximately 1042 times stronger than the gravitational force between them. That's a 1 followed by 42 zeros. The electromagnetic force is so incomprehensibly more powerful than gravity that for electrons, gravity doesn't exist. It's meaningless. Electromagnetic forces are everything. So here's the question that should keep you awake tonight. If these forces are that monstrously strong, why doesn't matter simply tear itself apart? Why isn't everything constantly exploding? The answer borders on magical cancellation. Consider what an atom actually is. At its center sit protons carrying positive charge. Surrounding them electrons carrying negative charge. Positive and negative, plus and minus. These charges obey one elegant rule, like repels like. Opposites attract. The magnitude of repulsion exactly equals the magnitude of attraction. In ordinary matter, you get an intimate mixture of positive and negative charges. Protons and electrons packed as close together as physics permits. Every positive charge surrounded by negatives. Every negative surrounded by positives. The arrangement produces perfect balance. Those enormous repulsive forces cancel against equally enormous attractive forces. The net effect is zero. Everything appears neutral, but those monstrous forces haven't disappeared. They're still there, straining against each other in perfect equilibrium. And because they're so huge, even the tiniest imbalance creates effects you can feel. When you rub that plastic, you move perhaps 1 electron in every trillion, essentially nothing. But it was enough to make your arm hairs reach upward, because when the underlying forces are that enormous, even microscopic excess produces noticeable effects. Now, Here's where it gets uncomfortable. This realization forces you to rebuild your entire understanding of physical reality. Pick up a coffee mug. Hold it in your hand. What are you feeling? You think you're feeling solid ceramic, physical substance pressing against your skin. Wrong. You're feeling electromagnetic repulsion. The electrons in your hand are pushing against the electrons in the mug with tremendous force. The reason you can't shove your hand through the ceramic is because electromagnetic forces are so powerful that the electrons absolutely refuse to overlap. Your hand never actually touches the mug. Never. There's always a gap, a tiny space between the atoms of your skin and the atoms of the ceramic. You're not experiencing contact. You're feeling the electromagnetic force pushing back at you across that infinitesimal distance. Think about what just happened. Think about what that means for your entire experience of reality. Every force you've ever felt is electromagnetic. Every push, every pull, every sensation of touch or pressure or resistance. All of it is electromagnetic repulsion and attraction acting at a distance. You have never touched anything in your entire life. Every time you believed you were touching something, you were actually feeling electrons pushing away from electrons through empty space. The same force you witnessed with the plastic wrap, just operating at smaller distances where the forces become immense. This isn't philosophical speculation. This isn't metaphor. This is measured, verified, tested physics. And it should fundamentally change how you see the world. Now let's examine wires, because this is where the standard explanation completely falls apart. You have a copper wire stretching across your house. At one end, an outlet. At the other end, a lamp. You flip the switch. The lamp illuminates instantly. What happened? The textbook explanation claims electricity flows like water. Electrons enter the wire at one end, travel down its length, emerge at the other end, and power your lamp. That explanation is completely wrong. Individual electrons in a wire move incredibly slowly, about 1 millimeter per second. At that pace, an electron would need roughly half an hour to traverse your living room. But your lamp turns on instantly. The moment you flip the switch, light appears. So what's actually happening? Here's the key insight that changes everything. The wire is already packed with electrons. Copper contains enormous numbers of free electrons just sitting there, ready to move. When you close the switch, you create a voltage difference across the wire. That voltage pushes on the electrons at one end. But because electrons repel each other across distances, that initial push immediately affects the neighboring electron, which affects the next one, which affects the next one. Imagine a line of people standing shoulder to shoulder, stretching across a football field. You shove the first person. The last person stumbles almost instantly, not because the first person sprinted down the line, but because the push transmitted through the crowd. Each person barely moved, but the signal traveled nearly instantaneously. The push travels through copper wire at close to the speed of light, not because individual electrons zoom through the metal, but because the electromagnetic force propagates at tremendous velocity. That's what makes electricity useful. You can push here, and something responds there, almost instantly, across enormous distances. But where does the push originate? Trace it back. Your lamp connects to an outlet. The outlet connects to wires in your walls. Those wires connect to power lines outside. Power lines connect to substations. Substations connect to transmission lines. And those transmission lines connect to a power plant, perhaps 100 miles away. At that power plant, something massive is spinning. A turbine weighing hundreds of tons, rotating thousands of times per minute. That spinning motion happening miles from your home is what powers your lamp. How is that possible? What connects distant spinning metal to the light in your room? The answer is magnetism. And here's the revelation that unified physics in the 19th century. Electricity and magnetism are not two separate phenomena. They are two aspects of one unified force. The electromagnetic force, moving electric charges create magnetic fields. Changing magnetic fields create electric currents. They're inseparable aspects of the same underlying reality. Michael Faraday discovered this in 1831. He took a coil of copper wire and moved a magnet near it. Current flowed through the wire. No battery, no power source. Just motion and magnetism producing electricity. Faraday had no mathematical training, couldn't write equations, but he understood something profound. He understood that invisible fields permeate all of space, and that motion through those fields generates electrical effects. James Clerk Maxwell, working 30 years later, unified everything Faraday discovered into 4 elegant equations. Those equations revealed that light itself is electromagnetic waves, that electricity, magnetism, and light are all manifestations of one fundamental force. Maxwell's equations are considered by many physicists to be the most beautiful achievement in the history of science. Here's how a generator actually works. You spin copper wire inside a magnetic field. The magnetic field pushes on the electrons in the copper. The electrons resist, but the field insists. You force electrons to flow. That's electric current. Motion plus magnets plus copper equals electricity. Now reverse it. Push electricity through copper wire placed inside a magnetic field. The field pushes on the moving electrons. The wire moves. That's a motor. Same phenomenon, direction reversed. Generators convert motion into electricity. Motors convert electricity into motion. And the reason this works is because electricity and magnetism are unified, 2 faces of one force. We're about to connect everything. But before we do, consider this. Are you the kind of person who actually follows through? Who takes knowledge and does something with it? Because what comes next isn't just information. It's a lens that will change how you perceive everything, and you cannot unsee it. Think about how extraordinary this is. You're telling me that moving metal in one location causes metal to move in another location, connected by nothing but thin copper wire. Yes. You're telling me that spinning magnets near copper generates a push that travels through wires at nearly light speed and makes distant copper move. Yes. Water falls on one side of a dam in one state. Turbines spin. Copper moves through magnetic fields. Electrons get pushed. The push propagates through hundreds of miles of wire. It reaches your house, flows through a motor, and your ceiling fan turns on. Water falling in one place makes a motor spin in another place. 100 miles away, connected by nothing but slender metal wire stretched across the landscape. That's insane. That's magic dressed in equations. You don't even need permanent magnets. Take a coil of copper wire. Run electricity through it. The moving electrons create a magnetic field around the coil. Now place that coil near another coil of copper wire. The magnetic field from the first coil pushes electrons in the second coil. Current flows in the second coil, even though there's no physical connection between them. That's a transformer. That's how the entire power grid operates. Just copper. Just electromagnetic fields. Metal talking to metal across empty space. Now, here's the thing that should completely restructure how you perceive reality. I said earlier that all forces you feel are electromagnetic. Every push, every pull, every sensation of contact or pressure or resistance. But think carefully about what that implies. The mechanical forces you experience daily, the feeling of touching solid objects, those aren't fundamental. They're consequences of the electromagnetic force. The electromagnetic force is the fundamental reality. Everything you experience as touch is derived from it. When you push on a door, you're creating electromagnetic repulsion between electrons in your hand and electrons in the wood. When you walk across a floor, you're held up by electromagnetic repulsion between electrons in your feet and electrons in the ground. When light hits your eyes, you're detecting oscillating electromagnetic fields, causing electrons in your retina to shift positions. Chemistry is electromagnetic forces between electrons in different atoms. Heat is atoms vibrating because electromagnetic forces hold them in their crystalline positions. Biology is chemistry, which is electromagnetic. Your entire sensory experience of reality consists of electromagnetic interactions. And here's the deepest truth, the one that frustrates everyone who demands ultimate explanations. You cannot explain the electromagnetic force in terms of anything simpler. You cannot say it's like a spring or like a rope, because springs and ropes are made of electromagnetic forces. The electromagnetic force is fundamental. It's one of 4 basic forces of nature. You have to accept it as a brute fact about how the universe is structured, and then everything else gets explained in terms of it. That's uncomfortable. The electromagnetic force acts at a distance, and that violates your intuitions. You've evolved to understand contact forces, objects bumping into each other. But contact is an illusion. There is no contact anywhere in the universe. There are only electromagnetic forces acting across tiny distances. To genuinely understand electricity, you must rebuild your intuition from nothing. You must accept that the universe is made of fields permeating all of space, that charged particles push and pull on each other across those fields. That action at a distance is the rule rather than the exception. So now what? You've just spent considerable time fundamentally changing how you understand reality. That's not nothing. That's rare. The question is, will you remember this tomorrow, next week? Or will it fade like everything else you've learned and forgotten? Here's the complete picture of what happens when you flip a light switch. You close a circuit. Electrons throughout the entire system begin drifting slowly, about a millimeter per second. At the power plant, perhaps 100 miles distant, a turbine spins. Magnets rotate near copper coils. The changing magnetic field pushes on electrons in the copper. Those electrons push on neighboring electrons. The push propagates at nearly light speed through hundreds of miles of wire. The push arrives at your house in a fraction of a second. Electrons flow through the thin filament in your bulb. The filament resists. It's difficult for electrons to squeeze through such a narrow path. That resistance generates heat. The filament gets hot enough to glow white. Electromagnetic waves radiate outward from the glowing filament. Some of those waves, traveling at exactly 299, 792, 458 meters per second, strike your eyes. The oscillating electromagnetic fields cause electrons in your retina to shift position. Those moving electrons trigger cascading chemical reactions. Signals travel through neurons to your brain. You see light. Every single step is electromagnetic. The turbine spinning is electromagnetic forces between atoms in the metal. The signal traveling is electromagnetic repulsion propagating through the wire. The resistance is electromagnetic. The light radiating outward is electromagnetic waves. Your vision is your brain interpreting electromagnetic stimulation of your retina. And this process, this avalanche of understanding, began with Faraday moving a magnet near copper wire in 1831. Then Maxwell writing his equations in 1865 showing that light was electromagnetic. Then Heinrich Hertz generating radio waves in 1887, proving Maxwell correct. Then Edison and Tesla fighting over how to distribute electrical power across cities. Then 1,000 engineers figuring out transformers, generators, transmission lines, insulation, grounding, safety systems. Each discovery building on the last. Each insight opening doors to more insights. That's how science works. That's the avalanche that's been cascading forward for 2 centuries. And we're still avalanching, still discovering, still learning to manipulate these fundamental forces in new ways. 200 years ago, none of this existed. We didn't know about electromagnetic fields. We didn't know how to generate electricity. We couldn't transmit power across distances. Then we figured it out. We discovered these forces. We learned to manipulate them. We built machines that generate electricity, transmit it across continents, and use it to do useful work. Electricity gave us instant communication, telegraph, telephone, radio, television, internet, all electromagnetic. It gave us artificial light cities that never sleep, human activity unconstrained by the sun's schedule. It gave us Motus machines that work without animal muscle. It gave us computation, billions of tiny switches manipulating electromagnetic forces to process information. Everything about modern life runs on electricity. Everything depends on our ability to push electrons through wires and make things happen at a distance. So what is electricity really? Electricity isn't a thing. It's not a substance flowing through wires like water through pipes. Electricity is what we call it when we manipulate the electromagnetic force to do useful work. But more fundamentally, electricity is proof that the world is not what it seems. The world appears mechanical. Solid objects seem to push against each other through direct contact. But that's an illusion. The real world consists of fields and forces acting at a distance. Particles pushing and pulling on each other through empty space. When you watch plastic attract paper, you're witnessing the fundamental force that makes chemistry possible. When you turn on a light, you're commanding electromagnetic fields that permeate all of space. When you understand that, when you genuinely grasp what's happening, everything changes. You realize the world is electric. Forces act at a distance. Solid matter is just a carefully balanced dance of repulsion and attraction. And you realize that humans figured this out through observation, experimentation, and mathematical reasoning. We discovered these forces. We learned to manipulate them. We built an entire civilization on top of them. If you made it this far, you're part of a small group. The group that doesn't settle for simple answers. The group that wants to understand, not just know. People like you, people who think like this, they find each other. They recognize each other. They build on each other's understanding. That's how the avalanche continues. That's how we keep discovering. Next time you flip a switch, remember what you're actually doing. You're manipulating one of the four fundamental forces of nature. You're making electrons push each other across entire cities. You're converting distant motion into local electromagnetic fields and back into motion. You're wielding power over the basic structure of reality itself. That's what electricity really is. Not a utility, not a convenience. A window into the fundamental nature of existence, and proof that humans can understand and manipulate that nature. Not comfort, not familiarity, truth.